While we're waiting for any others to join, I'll just introduce myself. So I am Mark Foy. I'm a AFA Exec Director of Programs, and I've got Jane with me today. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jane Johnson and I'm AFA Executive Director for Membership Services.
Great. We've had a few more come in now, so I think we'll make a start. Yes, I hope you're all here for a professional registration workshop as the first thing to check off. So it's going to be a bit of a split session. So I've got a few slides that will talk through just an overview of the process and how that works. And then very open to Q&A from there. So hopefully people have had a look at the paperwork or they've got some questions beforehand and we'll answer them from there. Yeah, please do use the chat as we go along, or put your hand up, or shout out. To be honest, if you want attention, we'll keep it quite informal today. This is your session to find out about professional registration overall. So yeah, please do get involved. Right, I think we will make a start now. I'll just bring up some slides. So yeah, we'll just walk through the process for everyone. Some of this will start quite high level about what it is and why we're doing it, and then a bit about how the forms work and kind of what the timescales are for it. So just to confirm some of the kind of more official stuff around this, so obviously AFA, obviously which is part of what we are, and obviously to become professionally registered, you need to be a member of AFA. So hopefully everyone on the call today is a member of AFA, and I don't need to say that, but that is the first prerequisite of becoming professionally registered is to be an AFA member from there. But it's actually FedIP who are the kind of registration body, which is the umbrella organisation above AFA. So by completing AFA's paperwork and registration, you will get onto the FedIP register. Very, very tiny screenshot for people there, but that's a public register on the website. So it's always quite a good feeling the very first time you get assessed and your name's on there as a professional analyst alongside all the other professions that run through FedIP. But I say FedIP isn't a membership body that you can join. You do need to join AFA and apply through one of the bodies from there. Yeah, so as I'm sure everyone is an AFA member, but yeah, so what AFA have done and all the other membership bodies under FedIP is interpreted the standards that FedIP set and applied them to an analytics or and data roles from there. So they've been tailored to suit analysts, data engineers, data scientists, the whole kind of analytics family as we call it from there. The same ways like British Computer Society have done it for IT and all the other bodies under FedIP from there. So AFA has its professional development committee who are tasked by the AFA board to oversee the standards. So Jane and I are members of that. And that's where we constantly review the standards, do the paperwork and do the assessments. And then on the back of that, we'll make the recommendations to admit to the register of FedIP. So that's just a bit of a background about what registration is and kind of where the governance sits with the assessments. So why get registered? The first step is to come along to a meeting like this. So it's great to see people joining and are keen to doing it. So you hopefully won't need me to tell you a lot of this. Speak from personal experience, and I'm sure Jane will jump in as well. But it's really good as a relatively young profession as analytics is to kind of have your skills and experience validated, to have that backing in the community, independent people coming in. And I think really giving yourself like a bit of credibility and kind of getting your competencies kind of stamped and validated by the body, I think is the big reason. You may have your own. I say it's great you've joined today. Jay, I don't know if there's anything that you want to chip in for why to do it.
Yeah, as you say, it just validates you as a professional and actually gives you that little bit of kudos and confidence, I would say, when I'm sure as analysts, I mean, I've been in the 30 years in the NHS as an analyst, and the number of times you get asked to do a bit of analytics and this is the answer I want, you can say, well, I'm professional, I'm signed up to a code of practice, and I'll do the analysis. It just gives you that confidence to kick back on some of the ridiculous requests we get made.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a walk through the process of what you have to do to get registered. So again, hopefully some of you had a look around the website, look at the forms, all the information on the website. So um, we'll put the link in the chat, but again, I'm sure you're all familiar with the website from there. So the first thing you need to do is pick your level to apply at. So there's 4 levels: practitioner, up to senior, advanced, and leading from there. In a minute, I'll do a little comparison of the differences in them. What I will say is, though, there's no restrictions or limits on what you can or can't apply for. It's not linked to job titles or bands or anything like that. It's you and your skills and experience, not what you're paid or what you're called from this. We do ask that you use the documents that we ask you to fill in. People may have dissertations, other portfolios, published work that they've got that will support this. But unfortunately, to make it standardized and for ease for the assessors, we do ask you to kind of transfer that to our paperwork, which is all on the website from there, which I think I've seen the link just go in the chat. So again, just to plug the website, which I'm sure you're familiar with, so a bit of information about what it is, you can click through to the FedIP website, and all the guidance and all the route to apply is from there. Currently at the minute, if you were to apply today, it would be via email, but as of the 28th of March, so just before this registration window opens, we will be flipping it to a FedIP hub where you'll upload your documents to the FedIP website, which I think should be a lot better for users to submit to, and same for the assessors. So when you do come to submit, it may look slightly different how you do that, but you'll be given all the links and information of how to upload. You will need to create an account on the FedIP website, but again, all guides will be provided to enable you to do that. A little number at the top there, so currently up to 51 registered analysts. So again, I think the other exciting thing for this now is this is really the ground floor with getting in on building that profession. It's something we've been pushing for a couple of years now and growing that number up. So great if everyone on this call can add to that number, and it'd be good to hit some milestones and just keep strengthening that profession as a whole. Okay, so I mentioned the differences in levels. So this is a snippet from the document on the website, but just to give a taste of what the difference is in between the levels. Some of this will be quite self-explanatory as you become more senior or your experience grows. So a practitioner would be a more junior analyst where you're accountable for your own work and maybe not too many other people's works. Follow processes, maybe a lot of routine work, only occasionally non-routine work, and kind of doing basic analytical work from there. And then it grows up. I won't talk through all this. I'll leave it on the screen for a second just to look at, but it's just to demonstrate there is a clear step up between, as you move into senior practitioner, you're now starting to have responsibility for others. So you're managing their workload or responsible for them. And you start to do a bit more complex work, considering the pros and cons of different approaches that you do to it. Right up to leading, where we talk about policy and setting strategies for organizations and that. As I say, there's no hard rule about where to apply. What we've got is a really useful guidance document on the website, which for each of the standards sets this out, so you can look through that and pitch where you feel comfortable. Naturally, you'll probably zigzag between the standards, I'm sure, and it'll be entirely up to you where you feel you want to push to the higher one or go for the lower one from there. It's really about what you can evidence best, really. And we'll talk about the evidence in the paperwork in a minute. Jane, I'll just bring you in again for this about the differences in levels. Anyone want to add about kind of where to pitch yourself?
Yeah, as you say, you might find yourself in the different standards you can do, where you think I'm advanced practitioner level on that, I'm senior on this one, and the majority is senior. You have to be able to pass every standard at one level. So if most of your answers fit the practitioner level, but you've got a couple of seniors, you have to apply at the practitioner level, but you've already got yourself a good starting point, knowing that I already meet some of the seniors. So it might be that within the 3 years that you're on the register, you decide to reapply at a senior level. A year down the line, you might have progressed in your career enough to tick all the boxes on the senior, but you can't apply for a high level just because you tick some of the boxes. You have to meet all of the standards at A level.
Yeah, it's a really good point about thinking ahead, and that might be what tips it in the favor of some people. So you'll apply, and I'm sure you'll be successful, and you'll be registered as a senior practitioner for 3 years from there. If you were and ahhing about senior or advanced, and then in 3 years' time you want to go for advanced, it's starting from scratch with that paperwork from there. Um, if you maybe took the higher jump and you did advance first time round, when you reaccredit in 3 year time, it's a much slimmed down process to reaccredit at the same level. So for people who are straddling, um, you may want to think, do you look to gather that evidence for the higher one? So in 3 years' time, you can thank yourself that you did that jump from there. But
So I can see we've got a question there from Joe Thompson. If your responsibilities change, you know, it works both ways. It works up and it works down. Yeah, if you can provide, so you're saying there, if you used to have responsibility for a whole team, but now you're doing something different that doesn't involve team leadership. However, you are able to give examples of when you did have responsibility for the whole team. It might be that it's not so easy for you to provide evidence because you've maybe, you know, moved organization as well. It might be that we decide to set up a Teams call with you and talk through a little bit more information. So just because you're not still in that job, if you've got recent experience of having had that responsibility, then certainly go for that level. Is responsibility for the work of others a must for a senior practitioner? Or can you, oh, right. Not everybody necessarily, because you might have responsibility for the work of others, but if you have responsibility for some area rather than the person, I'm trying to think of an example, that just, you know, we need something that shows you have kind of an autonomous level of responsibility where people trust you to make those decisions. It could just be for yourself. It could be for how another team maybe produces a piece of work, although you might not have direct line management for them, but some sort of responsibility in what's being produced.
yeah, just to echo that, I definitely wouldn't get hung up about, if you don't manage staff, some analysts don't, and would never want to put anybody off. So even if you don't have direct line management, I should say, you may support people via peer checks, or, they may come to you for opinions, or you may delegate work to them, or you may support other analysts when they're doing work. Just having that awareness of how you do work with others would be key. Don't let, if you don't manage staff, put you off applying. That's not the purpose of this. And
Another, yeah, sorry, another question there. Can you base the level on your current job role or responsibility? Yes, but if you've just started a job, you might not have ticked the boxes on that job yet. It's not done on what your job description says. It's not done on how many degrees you've got. It's done on have you done this? Can you give examples of this, and can you evidence it? Which may well be your current job, or in the previous example, if you're going for a higher level, it might be a job you had previously where maybe you did have a bit more responsibility. As long as you can evidence recently, so you can't say, well, I managed a team of this many and I had all this responsibility 10 years ago, and then I decided to go off and travel around the world for 5 years and come back. That's too late. You're going to have to be, it's got to be something current in the last couple of years that you can use as your examples and your evidence.
yeah, we don't have any very hard rules around timelines for this. As Jane said, if a piece of your evidence is a routine bit of analytics, and you haven't got a recent example in the last 3 years, that would raise question marks as to why you aren't still at that level. But equally, when you look at leading practitioner, it talks about policy and strategy. That's stuff that might only come around 3, 4, 5 years. So, that would be fine to talk about a big 5 year strategy you did do 4 years ago. But other bits, we would expect more recent stuff, if you can evidence that still. I'm just checking any other bits in the chat, but I think we're done. I think the key thing, just when we're talking about jobs and roles as well, is this is your accreditation, not your jobs or your employer's organisation. So this is your skills, no matter what your job may or may not be or doing from there. So obviously, a job descriptions, job roles will be a guide for this. But if you do change employers, this goes with you. This is not linked to your current job. This is validation of your skills, whatever your job may be. Okay, I'll move on from this now. So just the step from there. So yeah, you've chose your registration level, as we've just spoke about. So we'll talk about reflective practices in a bit of detail in a minute, but that's the first bit. Is now start to think about the projects or your piece of work. So we just spoke about recency and the amount of evidence you can do for this, but we do accept, there will be some, really big projects that you might want to shout about that may be a little bit older, or you may not have access to. So, or you may not be able to evidence this stuff due to confidentiality. So again, as Jane said, we can arrange to meet with you and talk through some of these if there is, stuff that you're struggling to evidence. But I mean, I'm sure everybody on this call does hundreds and hundreds of analytical tasks all throughout the year. So I don't think there'll be a shortage. But again, if there's something particularly significant that we can work with you to support how you might evidence that or work it through, we don't want to miss out something. That's a really good example of what you can do. So we do ask you to complete, I think it's 3 to 4 reflected practices, which I'll talk through in a minute. And then there's the commentary document, which I've got some screenshots of as well, which will talk through about how you start to evidence this. But the main thing is at this stage, start to think about what are those projects that are really good piece of analytics that we'll talk through in a minute, that you want to share with us, and then compile your evidence and submit it. So a reflective practice will look a lot like this, which is we use a STAR model, which is situation, task, actions, and results. And basically what we want you to do is walk the assessor through all the steps you take when you do a piece of work. So in this one, this use an example of length of stay analysis, which is a fairly common one. I think one that we can walk through. There's no library of what isn't required for this in terms of examples. If you read the standards and it meets it, that's a story you can tell. Don't feel it needs to be like no analytics. It could be a project work, changing performance reports, or how you engage and doing a policy or a strategy. It doesn't have to be an analytical output all the time for this, but it's a fairly basic example that we can talk through that I think most people should be able to relate to. The probably hardest part for this is starting it and thinking, what do I do? And a lot of this, I'm 100% confident you guys will all do without even thinking. Each step we're going to talk through now, I will talk through this in a bit of detail. You will do, and you probably will. You might need to spend split seconds doing it in your head because you're all experienced and you just get on with stuff. And that's probably the hardest thing, is taking the step back to think, right, let me just break down all these steps and I'll evidence all the probably hundreds of thousands of thoughts that are going into a project that you probably take for granted. So I'll walk through this now. Yeah, so this is some length of stay analytics that they've done, and they've put it into an SPC chart from there. So we want to know about the situation. Why are you doing the work you're doing? How did it come about? So in this example, the line manager asked them to produce some length of stay. What you'll notice on this in the red, right, and in the brackets, is they've referenced the standards. So P1.1 talks about, where does your work come from for a practitioner level, who tells you what to do or what drives your work. So by doing that, we've ticked off a standard there that a manager's asked them to do a piece of work. So the next one, there was no analyst in that division, so that's why it came to them. And then they spoke to stakeholders in the surgical division to get an idea of what they wanted to look at. So again, one of the standards will be about, how do you collaborate with others? How do you work with others? So by just telling us that you've now gone to spoke to stakeholders in the surgery division, we're now ticking off another standard. And then once you've agreed the measures, right, we're going to drill down and look at similar pathways from there. And I'm now not impressive enough that I can't recall what 5.3 is, so I might ask Jane to hastily look that up if she's with me. But that'll lead to a standard around kind of defining what example is. Although I'm now wondering, Jane, if these link to the new standards or not, but we'll come back to that one. And then we're now just continuing the conversation with the colleagues, and we've decided that we want to put this in SPC. Oh, you're on mute, Jane, if you've got the answer for us now.
Yes. Practitioner level. Are we?
Yeah.
5.3. Oh yeah, practitioner level. Yeah. Carry on without me a second.
So basically all we've done here is just defined a situation. There's a piece of analysis that needs to be done. I've gone to speak to some stakeholders. I've decided how I'm going to present it. And you can see we've ticked off 4 standards just in what you'd probably all agree is quite simple steps, and steps that you won't even think about doing. So then we move into the task. This is where you're planning what you're going to do. So again, in this example, they said, oh, I was going to attend a meeting to do a bit more run through of the patient groups we were going to look at. I then needed to contact the clinical coding colleagues to get ICD-10 codes. So again, we're starting to tick off a lot of standards with, again, tasks that I'm confident you're all doing. What you'll notice in the blue writing after that second point under tasks is where we said these are now attached to my evidence. So what we want from this is obviously evidence that you're doing this. So for that example there, for that clinical coding one, it may be an email to a coding manager. That's great evidence, or it may be a diary invite to say you've gone to have a chat with somebody. They're often the evidence that people overlook because they think it's quite simple. You know, they send us all the scripts and the dashboards and all the logics and stuff, but they miss how they collaborate, how they talk to others from there. Like
I don't know if I'm looking at an old one or a new one compared to what you're looking at. I don't have a 5.3,
yeah,
but it's in the accountability and responsibility section.
Yeah, I think that talks to an old standard.
I might have it on this bit of paper. No, I think that must be a previous one. We're just down to 2, but it does fall into accountability and responsibility. So 5.1, describe how you've identified errors in your own work, how you've reported these, and what you put in place to reduce the chance of happening again. 5.2, if appropriate, describe how you assure the work of others. So it will be along those lines of how do you take responsibility for the errors and manage them in the future.
Great, thank you. So carry on the task now. So we said we're going to write some SQL code. So again, that'll be something you can evidence snippets of what you're going to do. And now what's really good is this next point where they're talking about SPC charts. And this person has said that they weren't really familiar with them before they started this piece of work. So they are going to seek out some learning. So again, really good example of, acknowledging your own limitations of your skills and then defining how you're going to fill that gap from there. That might be attending a training course, or it might be speaking to a colleague. This is all about how you kind of make your decisions and do your work from there. So in that task section, you've planned out what you're going to do. Again, I keep saying this, but these are all thoughts that will just instantly go through your head and you probably don't stop to think about all the steps you do. And so that is the real challenge of this is breaking down, but you'll find you do all this without thinking. So then into the action sections, this is now your outputs of what you've done. So this person's now attended a training course. So that's ticked a couple of standards off around keeping your skills up to date and, sharing knowledge. And as part of their evidence, they've uploaded a certificate of their attendance from there. So they've now wrote the script to pull this data from the warehouse, and they asked a colleague to peer check their code for them to make sure it was right from there. So again, we're ticking off a couple of standards around working with others, ensuring the quality and accuracy of your work. So the evidence they've uploaded will be a bit of SQL script from this. This isn't a technical assessment. The assessor won't be looking at the quality of your code. Don't worry about that. It's just to say this the steps I've done to prove you've done it from there. What they also might have uploaded is a diary invite or an email from that colleague that they asked to check. Hi Jane, do you mind checking over my code? Jane replies back, fantastic code, Mark. Perfect, that'll do the job. All great evidence that you are working with others and there's people are checking your work. So they're now moving on. So they've run the script and they've put it into Excel, which is a classic analyst move into there. Just on that mention of Excel, this assessment accreditation is kind of you and your process of doing analytics work, not about your technical skills. We're not looking for here's the latest technology and the fanciest stuff. It's about your decision making process and the confidence in your analytics, not about the strength of your skills from there. Talking us all the pros and cons of why Excel is a terrible system is just as good as doing some fancy data science. It's about the process, not about the output, if that makes sense. So yeah, they've used Excel and they've used that to take something to a steering group. So again, we've got more evidence there of collaborating with others. Again, evidence they might supply at that point might be an agenda from that steering group or some minutes to show that they were present and they talked through this. So they've now produced some SPC charts on the back of that, and they've attached a bit of evidence. So now this is all linking through to, you've identified a learning gap, identified where you're going to go to fill that gap. You've now evidenced your attendance on that course, and now you've given us an output of your learning from that. So just a simple thing of attending an SPC course like that, we'll start with ticking off 4 or 5 standards if we start to talk it through like this. And then this last one in the action section, again, is sharing those charts at a group meeting, doing a bit of presentation. And you can see from the evidence is there that ticks off quite a lot. Again, that number will be smaller. We have slimmed these down a little bit from there. But again, attaching a presentation as evidence from there. And we're ticking those standards off from there around, engaging with stakeholders. There may be some feedback from that. So this, I'm adding to this now, but somebody might have said, oh, can we add this into a future iteration? And then, you take something back, you redo it and you add it in. Again, evidence that conversation, that email, and it shows, how you're working with feedback, how you're working with stakeholders. And then the last bit is the results section, because obviously the purpose of analytics is to support decisions, to make a change, to make lives better for patients or your service users. So just referencing that, with on the back of the work you've done, the service team loved it. It helped identified some gaps and planned some work from that. It talks about information governance at this point. So some of the standards talk about, how you work safely with data. So, they've mentioned here around the controls they did, you're building dashboards, you don't needlessly put patient details on it, you control access, so not everybody can access files. Again, all stuff that you'll do. Again, evidence that might be screenshots of kind of permissions or anything from there. So we're now talking about this has now become a regular piece of work. So we're talking about, again, how you manage your time, how you plan this. What was now a ad hoc piece is now something that this is added to this analyst workload every month. So there's evidence around that. And then last bit is they now want to automate it because it's become a regular task. So they're now working with BI colleagues to make this happen. So again, working with others, collaborating from there. So I'll pause if there's any questions around reflected practice. So that was quite a simple example of a piece of work, but as you can see from that, you can start to hit a lot of standards just by breaking it down into those steps. I'll pause for questions, and Jane, anything you want to add if people are thinking?
Yeah, the only thing I will add, I was looking for 5.3 there and or 5.4 or whatever, and it's no longer there. Each standard we used to have, like, section 1, which was analytical approaches. We might have had 1.1 through to 1.7. Same with section 2, which is critical application. We might have had 2.1 up to 2.6. The committee went through and found a lot of duplication in how a lot of these were worded. So we've condensed it and summarized it a lot. So the actual number standards that you now have to add into these reflective practices and, to evidence is far less than what it used to be for the first round of applicants. So yeah, just be reassured that it's summarized, condensed, and hopefully makes the questions a lot clearer, because some of them were, duplicated over 2 or 3 standards. So there was a lot of work done to clarify it and pull it together. So when you're looking at those things that are saying you know, but I think there's a 2.8 there and a 2.7. There's just not that many anymore. I think there's a maximum of about 3 under each section.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work to streamline, haven't we, and make it as appealing for people as we can.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no other questions in the chat, so we'll move on. So what I will say, we look to 3 to 4 of these pieces of work, and they can be on whatever topic you want, really, and not all will hit all the standards. So as you kind of do a bit of a marrying up piece of what examples speak to which standards, you know, you can start to chop and change, and you know, some examples will fit some and others will fit other. You may have a really good example. So I know from my personal experience, so one of my examples, I probably hit around 70 to 80% of the standards in one, which started to tick off a lot. We do ask for 3, so don't feel you can just submit one and that ticks them all. We do want a range of your skills, but again, don't feel they all need to be big, meaty examples. You can, you know, split it across 3 or 4, or have one big one, 2 little ones from there. So the other second half of the reflective practice is the reflecting on it, really. So what we just want is a page, no more than a 4 or 5 lines on each one about what went well, what went less well, what would you learn, and what would you do differently. As I said before, this isn't about your skills as such, it's about how you apply your skills, whatever level you may be at. You'll all be familiar with the National Competency Framework for Analytics, which is coming out. That is more focused on the skills you need to do your job. Professional registration is how you apply your skills, not what your skills are. So a great example could be what went well. Nothing. It was a disaster. I didn't have the tools or the skills I needed. It would have been so much better if I could have done that. Just you demonstrating you have the awareness of how things can be different, or how you weighed up pros and cons or advantages, or how you did the best you could, but you couldn't do any better. But I would have liked to have done this next time is really powerful example of just how you go about your job. And from there, so yeah, don't feel that you need to always be positive in this. There's a lot of learning in the, oh, I wish I could have done this, or I wish I managed my time better, or I wish I knew how to use R because I was using Excel, I was using this and I was using that. And yeah, don't hold back on this. It's still a reflection, not a judgment on what you have or you haven't done. Okay, that's it for reflective practices. So they're the ones that I'd recommend to start first. Think of those examples. What you'll do alongside that is then start to map it to the standards which are held in the application form. So we'll just walk through this. So the first section is just a little bit about you, just so the assessor gets to know you and your role, really. So tell us a bit about yourself, brief career history, a bit what your role is, member of AFA, what stuff you might do outside of work as well, in terms of, attending branch meetings, or, becoming fresh registered. We've now got a section at the top if you've got anything that you want to share in terms of published papers, if you've been attending conferences and presenting, if you've won some awards. Yeah, it's not the time to be modest. Professional registration, so do shout out, hey, I won Analyst of the Year on the AFRA Awards, or my team won this, or I've got these papers published. We want to see that and we want to celebrate that. So anything of that, get that at the top of your application. A little bit about your qualifications, and then we ask a little bit just about your employment history as well on the next page. Again, no more than a kind of few bullet points on each role. This is not a job application. We're not looking for full CV. It's just to give the assessor a feel of kind of your career journey and where you're up to from there. Probably main thing that I'd get you to take away from today is this evidence matrix, which I think should really make it easier. So these are all the standards for the practitioner level. As Jane said from there, if you notice in the 5.1 section now, we've condensed them down. So it's only 5.1 and 5.2 now. So as I said, that used to go up to 5.8s, and everyone was 1.8, 2.8. So we've done a lot of work to make this as easy for people as possible. What you can do, this is a PDF where you can tick it. So as you're writing your reflective practices and you're hitting the standards, you can tick these off. Or you can, in the evidence box, you can say evidence 1 meets this, evidence 2 meets that one from there. And what you'll get at the end is a complete matrix then. And you may have various ticks in one reflective practice, other ones in the two. That's what I was saying before about, you can hit them across different ones. They don't all have to be in the same one. And that's basically your checklist. If you've got something for each one of them, you've evidenced each standard from there. So I'd definitely recommend doing that as you go along, as you're writing it. Check it against standards, tick it off, and you'll fill this matrix up in no time from there, and then you'll know you're done. So just a quick look at the form. So it takes this form here. So we list the standards on the left-hand side. There's a little box for commentary, and then we ask you to tell us what reflective practice or evidence speaks to this. So if you've called from that length of stay example, so this person was asked by their manager to do a bit of tasks, to do this task from there. So just write a paragraph here. My manager's asked to support the surgery division to do some length of stay analysis to solve this, to do that from there. So then in the reflective practice, you'd put reflective practice 1, and then evidence might have been a screenshot of an email for the request coming in, or maybe if you have a proper job request system, you may do a little screenshot of how your job's coming from there. You say evidence 1 ticks that. What I will say is you don't need to repeat yourself in this box if you've covered it in the reflective practice, but don't just write see reflective practice 1. We're looking for a little bit more from that. So you may have like 2 sentences in a bullet point on your reflective practice. Give us a couple more on this just to expand it, but don't copy and paste or do the same thing from there. We can, by linking it up, we can pick it up from there. Yeah, we do. I think, have we got a word count, Jane, on this now? Have we said, or you can kind of judge it from the box size. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, sorry, Jane, you're on mute there now.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of 100 words or something. Not looking for essays, as Mark said. You've explained a lot in your reflective practice, and we just want you to pad it out a bit here with a few extra sentences.
Yeah, so 200 words. What's 6-7 sentences maybe. You can tick that off from there.
There's 2 or 250 of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it actually now says on the forms online, does it?
Yeah, I think we did add it for the new paperwork from there. But yeah, just yeah, add out your reflective practice a little bit more detail, or if you want to expand on stuff from there.
And there will be some standards, especially when you get to something like the AFA Code of Conduct. You might only have one sentence on the reflective practice, but for that one, actually, it's probably more likely that you'll add a lot more in the commentary, because it's not something that's so easy to evidence as having been done in your day-to-day work. I mean, you do it in your day-to-day work because you work to a code of conduct, but there might be a lot more that you can expand on in the commentary.
Yeah, a lot of the C standards are like that, so there may not be much evidence from this, but it'll ask how does your role link in with the organization, and maybe a little bit about what your career ambitions are and how you keep up to date with stuff. So yeah, that's one way you might write a bit more in that, because there's no evidence, but you'll talk about how you hit them. Yeah, so from the paperwork from there, again, this is on the website to have a look at. It then needs to be signed off by a peer to confirm all the evidence in what you've said is true. Doesn't need to be a manager, just somebody who can verify. So yeah, it can be a peer or a colleague or somebody else who does know you to verify this. From that, so don't worry if maybe you've just changed jobs, so your new manager wouldn't be appropriate. It could be a former manager to do that, or a former colleague. Something else we've implemented from this new round is around sponsorship. So if you work with somebody who's already professionally registered, we allow them to sign it as a sponsor, which is kind of a bit of extra kudos, and it just kind of verifies the evidence that somebody's already gone through this process, as vouched and signed off for you. So makes it a bit easier for the assessor and a bit better for yourself that somebody's already gone through this, has verified it too. So if you do know somebody already registered, I'd definitely approach them to be a sponsor, just to add that bit of extra verification. Um, I'll talk about dates in a minute. What I just want to talk about first, though, is that point about evidence verification and kind of what we do if there's anything a bit borderline. I'm sure Jane will 100% agree with this, but as assessors, we want you to pass. This is not a punitive assessment where you'll submit it off and we'll just stamp it as rejected and send it back and say apply again in 3 months. It's as far from that as you can. We want you to pass. We will support you to pass. So when an assessment is allocated out to one of the assessors, we'll have a look through it. And if we feel there is any gaps or bits of evidence that we feel are missing, we will approach you to say, thanks for your application, but can you give us a little bit extra on this? So it will be a two-way conversation to do that. I had one the other month where, and due to confidentiality reasons, the candidate couldn't share too much. So we just had a quick Teams call. They showed me a few things on Teams, and I asked specifically for some evidence that I felt they were lacking, and they gathered that for me and gave me that. So yeah, we 100% want you to pass, and we will support you as best as we can to do that. Jane, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so as Mark says, it's not a straightforward, it's not a pass fail. We go through an assessment form and we mark it ourselves and we say yes, that meets the standard, or it's borderline, or it doesn't meet the standard. And for some of the borderlines, as he said, we don't send it back to you to redo it. We arrange a call, or we email you and say, well, actually, can you send the certificate that proves you did your IG training, or something like that. It might be something as simple as that, or it might be that we just want a little bit more context around a piece of work you've done, just to ask a couple more questions. So it might be a half-hour call, and if we're happy, then we just write on the assessor's form, yeah, spoke to the candidate, happy, and we put it back to the the committee with a recommendation to add to the register. So it's back and do the whole thing again at all. You don't get sent the form back at all. We just do it in our commentary on our assessor's form.
Thank you, Jane. Right, I think the last slide for me now is just some of the key dates. So to make it easy for the assessors and to have a bit of process to it, registration window opens every quarter. So the next one opens in 10-11 days time, 1st of April. So that's why we've got this kickoff meeting today. So then that window closes on the 30th of April. What we've got at the end of the month, 27th, is a Q&A workshop. Won't take the same format like it's done today. Obviously, I've been talking at you for 44 minutes now. That agenda will be very much open for you to bring your specific questions. So, if you've made a start and you're struggling, you want to speak to some of the assessors about, what they're looking for, or you're not sure about what you should or shouldn't do, that's the point of that workshop. So I would strongly recommend get yourself booked on for that if you're going to start in April, and use that window with the last week in the month to hopefully iron out anything you do. But yeah, do bring your questions. It's not going to be a presentation workshop, that one. It's very Q&A. So window closes on the 30th of April. There may be some time after that, as we say, where we do clarify stuff. So if there is a bit of a query, we will work with you outside of that window to gather that last bit of evidence. But if you get your main bulk in by the 30th. So during the month of May, the applications will be assigned out to the assessors, and during that month, Jane and I and the other 4 of us who are assessors, or however it is now, will complete them in the month of May. And then 12th of June is when the next professional development committee will meet, and that's where we sign off our recommendations. So Jane and I will do an assessment, we'll go through evidence, we may have spoke to you to clarify it, we complete a form which ticks off that you've hit the standards, and we make a recommendation to admit you to the register. And then the committee will sign that off from there. And then very quickly after that, hopefully with the
There's a quick question on the chat from Marcus. Does the registration process take place once a year? No, it's once every 3 months. So the next window would be April, May, June, open again in July and October, and so on, February.
Everyone this call's eager to apply in April now. You've got a 10-day warning into March now. You've been walked through the forms, so you're all round to go, aren't you, for this one? I should have said yes to try and force people to apply in April. I'm only joking. So yes, no quarterly, but yeah, do get it in. So after the 12th of June, committee will hopefully take the recommendation to admit. So I mentioned at the start about the automated hub that you'll use. So again, a lot of that should be streamlined through there. So you'll get notified of your success, which I've no doubt that will be the case. There is then a £25 payment which goes to FedIP to get you on the register, and that's an annual payment. So that will be arranged with you, and then yeah, you will be admitted, and you'll be a professionally registered analyst. And I think that was it for my slides, Jane.
The only thing to add is during, so your membership on the professional register, your entry on the professional register, the public register with FedIP is for 3 years. So it's £25 that has to be paid a year for your professional registration, but you also have to remain as an AFA member. If you leave AFA, if your membership, expires and you don't renew, then you would come off the public register as well. It has to be the two together.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that is the end of the slides. We'll pause for questions again. What I would say again from personal experience, the hardest part of all this is starting, or when you're staring at that blank piece of paper. Once you get in the kind of groove from there, you'll find it flows quite easily. I say that reflective practice we spoke through hopefully is something you can all relate to about how some of that sounds quite simple can meet a lot of standards from there.
And that's a good point about getting in the groove. I would block out some time to do this, whether you take a day's leave or you decide to do it on a Saturday or whatever. You can crack it out within a day, I would say, but you have to stay focused. If you do a little bit, especially if you go between your reflective practices, you lose track of what you've already done, and you lose, and you think, oh God, did I say that I'd done 1.2? And oh, I have to go back and check, or was it in my other one? If you're doing it and you stay in the zone and keep focused and do it, it's a lot easier to keep track of where you are. There's a couple of questions there. Can you provide more detail on reflective practice which contain confidential or organisationally sensitive information? You can, on certain things, use the blackout thing and blank out sensitive information. If it's commercial information, I'm trying to think of an example, I suppose, that things could be discussed in a Teams call. Can you think of anything around that?
Yeah, I think if there's, as I say, this isn't necessarily about the outputs as such, it's about how you've applied your skills. So if the output of what you've done was sensitive, we wouldn't necessarily need to evidence that or send it off. We may want a team call if you wanted to quickly show it on screen just to verify it, but we're much more interested in how you've applied techniques than what the output may be from that. But again, you can redact bits if you do want to do that, and we can get a feel for it. What I would say is probably do get in touch with us if if you feel you are really limited in what you've done. I say we will work with you as best we can. So I think through the info at AFA Analysts email address, which on the website, will help you iron out that. But again, it's not about the output as such, it's about how you've got to it that we're looking to assess.
Yeah. So do you need to revalidate after 3 years? Yes, you do. If you are revalidating for the same level, it's a very quick and easy form. However, if you don't have to do all that stuff again. However, if you have decided that during those 3 years you are ready to progress to another level, then you do have to go through that process for the new level of registration. Information about sponsorship. each applicant has to have someone to sign off. So you've done a whole thing with a lot of reflective practices saying, I've done this piece of work, I was asked to do this. It could be your line manager that you go to and say, can you just sign off and say that what I've written in this form is true, that you know me and you know I'm an analyst and you know this is what I do. Or it could be somebody you've worked on a project with, you know, it could be one of your peers, one of your colleagues. However, the sponsorship thing that Mark was referring to is if somebody in your organization is already professionally registered, whether it's, you know, if it's one of your colleagues, they can go through the evidence that you have provided, and that's more for us to be they can sign off and sponsor as a registered professional themselves, and it kind of helps AFA know that you have been kind of already validated through that process, and we just have to do the final checks on your application. So you don't need a registered person to be your sponsor, but you do need someone who you've worked with or worked for that knows what you do to say, yes, this application is, you know, I agree, this is what they do. So if you choose to apply at senior practitioner level, but it's clear from your application and evidence you're at advanced level, would this be pointed out by the assessors? If we kind of can see it, but sometimes if the question's a little bit different and you haven't therefore answered that bit of the question, we can't necessarily tell if you are at an advanced level. I'm just looking, I'll just straight on 5.2, if appropriate, describe how you assure the quality of work of others. For practitioner, senior, describe how you assure the quality of work of others, or it's the same actually. Advanced practitioner, describe how you would take responsibility for sharing good practice within your organization and to the wider analytical community. Now, if you've applied at senior practitioner level, we wouldn't necessarily know from your response to how do you assure the quality of work of others that you might have been sharing good practice within the organization and a wider analytical community, because you haven't answered that. So we wouldn't necessarily know. We might get some indication that actually you are really very good at your job and you're quite advanced, but we wouldn't automatically know that you are the next level up. So this is why you have to be pretty sure when you pick which standard you're going for, that you can tick all the boxes on that. If you've ticked 90% of the boxes on advanced, but you've got 100% on the senior, you're going to have to apply for senior. But next time, you know, once you've got the extra 10% on the advanced, then go for it.
I'll pick up this last one. I'll just share a screenshot of the stuff that might be a bit hard to evidence. So 1 second. So this is the paperwork. So some of the standards that you might think, how do I get this into reflective practice, is, you know, how do you keep your skills up to date and give examples of future development plans? So you may find that hard to get into a reflective practice about an analytics piece of work. And maybe that might be held in your PDR or something like that. So that would be an easy way, but maybe you've not, you know, got one of that. So that might be one where you do a bit more in the commentary, because, you know, talking about your future career might be quite hard to fit into reflective practice. And with the absence of a PDR, depending on how they're laid out, you may not do that. So yeah, we'd accept that in there.
And we wouldn't necessarily, although we prefer as much evidence as possible, if there's one or two standards where you can't actually physically provide a bit of evidence, but your commentary is very full, we kind of get that. So yeah, but if you can provide evidence, better. But you know, if you just stick in one or two bits of evidence throughout your whole application, no, that's not going to do. But one or two missing is acceptable.
Yeah, so here's those C standards just for context there. So again, some of them you might be able to get into reflective practice. So how does your work impact patients or care or well-being? Some of that may be quite indirectly, so you might write a bit more about it than you can evidence, but some of these might fit a little bit better into reflective practices. Some you do, but a lot of this is, where does your role sit in the organisation? So again, that might be an awkward one to fit in, but just tell us about what your role is and how that links in with others. So I hope that helps. Okay, if there's no more questions, we'll call time on that 3 minutes early.
So there's about 18 people, so we expect 18 applications next month.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody for joining. Yeah, hopefully that's answered some of your questions, and you are gonna apply in April. Do reach out in the meantime. Obviously, we have the Q&A workshop on the 23rd. Conscious that may not work with people's diaries. So yeah, do reach out if there's a few questions and you can't make it.
I think also they get recorded, so I'm not sure where the recordings go. Can you answer that, Lizzie? You're here, so it might not necessarily be your questions that have been asked at the Q&A, but it might be worth looking at the recording, and somebody else might have had the same question.
Yeah, and just another one about the slides. Yeah, we'll share the slides as well. There we go, Lizzie's answering the chat. Yeah, we'll get that on the website too. But no, thank you everybody. Yeah, we hope to see applications. Yeah, come along to the Q&A if you want at the end of the month, say, to iron out any bits from there. Do reach out in the meantime, and best of luck applying. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks very much.